right. Hello and good morning. Welcome to day 3 of DataCon LA 2020, and welcome to the Data for Good track. Soon we'll be listening to Know Your Community, Data Power to the People session with Preston Mills. I'm Courtney Fowler, your host, and our co-host today is Ed Choi. We'll be moderating the chat and a Q&A for you during this session. Again, today we have our guest Preston Mills, and he'll be presenting his topic, Know Your Community, Data Power to the People. A brief bio about Preston. Preston is a community data manager for LA County. Preston manages data governance of the recent NSF fund partnership with Cal State LA and community partners. Preston holds a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics and sociology. And prior to joining the team, Preston was a data systems administrator for a local nonprofit. He currently supports the team's GeoHub administration, open data automation, as well as the team's equity and data literacy initiatives. Without further ado, welcome me and joining Preston Mills.
Thanks, Courtney. So I'll go ahead and share my screen because I'm really excited also. I am nervous, so everyone just be patient with me as my Zoom video kind of does weird things. But just to kind of start, my name is Preston Mills and I'm the community data manager on the Mayor's Data team, as Courtney had mentioned. And today I'm really excited to talk about this Know Your Community platform that we've created to really talk through its specifics and also talk through its application and why it may be significant in this current moment. And so really to start off, what I'd like to do is just go ahead and give some focus on just one way that data has been used, at least here in the city and by community members. And so this is an example in which our census outreach team and many volunteers had actually used data to better understand their neighborhoods as they were promoting the census and advocating for additional census resources to better approach and communicate the need in particular neighborhoods. And so what you see here is actually a report that we'll get to talk about and learn more about later in the future. But just to even start, what we're seeing is just a few demographic variables and information provided to better understand Boyle Heights, and that census outreach volunteers had used to better address their outreaches approach. So, what are some of the main challenges or main concerns that folks had experienced or seen in this particular moment, and how can we speak to that moving forward? The next one is actually just to kind of talk about how city data can be useful in contextualizing a lot of different information and community components that we often just see and live and experience. And really what I'm speaking to here is just the map that you're seeing on this left-hand side. What you're seeing is actually the predominant business categories or business industries by census block group. And what you're looking at it is in relationship to LAUSD campuses, those little green shapes that you'll see. And so although this is just for example purposes, you can imagine how city data leveraged with other data sources can help folks better see different trends and meaningful insights around what can I do and what should I be advocating for to change some of these components that I may not see fit for my specific community or neighborhood. And so talking about some of the different examples of where this information is coming from, I have to draw to the GeoHub. The GeoHub is our city's geospatial platform in which we can actually showcase all of our city data that you can put on a map. We have over 1,000 data sets, and I actually encourage all of you to join our thousands of community users that have an account and are already going ahead and creating maps to tell their data stories. Similarly, we have a platform known as data.lacity.org. This one actually hosts the majority of our tabular data sets. And here we've got over 40 million views, over 1.7 million data downloads. And it's just a place in which you can see data like 311 and permit data. And a lot of the data that we actually use for our Know Your Community platform is actually coming from this one here. And so I encourage anyone and everyone to check out our open data portals as we talk about how we can make this information more accessible for folks who don't necessarily have the time, resources, or capacity to transform and analyze raw data sets in the way that we provide them. And so as we talked about all of the thousands of community users, we've talked about, the many different ways that data can actually be used either in mapping particular resources or just understanding neighborhoods. We can clearly kind of show, and what we've realized is that data actually does play a pivotal role in civic engagement because, as you all can imagine, it can bring new voices into policymaking. It can uncover inequities and discuss and open a place where folks can converse around community challenges. And it can really empower folks to use this as a tool to advocate for additional change. But often as we talk about the different ways that data can be used, we have to recognize that there are some baseline challenges that many folks struggle with. And I myself can attest to this in some shape and form. And yet we really have to find a way to address them. So one of the first ones to start off with is just understanding what data is. As we talk about data like bikeway data, for example, we can think about, what bikeways are in and of themselves, but what does the word data entail for a resident who may be familiar with bikeways, but not know what type of information, what would that look like? And even taking it a step further is, what do I do with it? Do I analyze it? Do I transform it? Are those the same words? What do I do? And as we think about those types of challenges, it's the tip of the iceberg for many of you who may be familiar. And as a result, there may be some confusion and distrust around, is the data in and of itself credible? Can I even validate that myself? And so with these types of challenges, what we hope to share is that we had to find a way to address this. And one of the ways that we look to start off with is actually partnering with our 99 neighborhood councils in the city of Los Angeles. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the neighborhood council system in Los Angeles, really, they represent our communities and help make the city more responsible to local needs. It's our city's closest form of government to our residents. And so, these neighborhood council residents and stakeholders will actually advocate for things around homelessness, housing, emergency preparedness, transportation, and so many other community challenges that folks are facing and advocating to change in their neighborhoods. And so we saw this entire system as a great opportunity to embed data literacy into advocacy in and of itself. That actually started in 2020. And as you can all imagine, this pandemic really made us kind of realize that not only can we no longer hold these in-person trainings, but we need to reassess how we can inform and prepare our residents to take advantage of the information that's readily available here at the city. So one of the examples that I'll just quickly just jump over to is just a story map. And for those of you who aren't familiar with story maps, it's a web page that we are able to create in partnership with Esri, a leading GIS software company, in which we talk through, not only what is Empower LA, what is the mayor's office, but then we start to talk about what is data, what about data ethics, what about data collection, privacy, and where do neighborhood council board members fit into all of this? And so as we talk through and share all of the ways that the Know Your Community platform can be used, we really hope to encourage folks to look into the neighborhood council system as well, because as we think about preparing folks to not only take advantage of this quick, ready to use information provided by our platform, let's start to think about ways that we can use data to advocate for additional changes outside of the platform with all of the other data sets that we have access to. And also to help us understand what should we be doing with our data on our Know Your Community platform. So I'll go back to share a bit more on the presentation side of things. Because as we talked about how data is this great and useful tool, we've got to also recognize the fact that we have some serious challenges that we're looking to address with this platform. And it's the fact that, like many open data portals, the information in and of itself is not very accessible to residents. In the sense that if you don't necessarily know how to transform a data set, how to search for a particular data set of interest, there is a particular barrier that we see residents facing, and that's why we have these data literacy trainings. And yet we also know that the data in and of itself is not particularly community focused. But really, as we're thinking through these challenges, how can we also better understand our opportunities? And that's really where we started to think about, what does the data portal actually provide? It provides real-time city data. We also have to recognize that here at the city, we do have a set number of resources to build out portals, platforms, et cetera, that can be accessible. And also, as we're thinking about making data a bit more accessible, these literacy initiatives are growing, just as our GeoHub community is. And so all of these challenges and opportunities together kind of mix and combine in a very intentional way to develop this Know Your Community platform. And you can imagine this platform has been created or been developed over the course of months, back and forth with community stakeholders, with departments, with leadership, and many different stakeholders that are looking to create something for our community users and residents. And so we had to really make this succinct and tighten our approach. And so this is what you're seeing here, is our objective for this Know Your Community platform is to give folks a place to learn more about their community, learn more about what local events are occurring, and learn more about what city services are offered, from upcoming road work to open 311 calls to blocks of right-of-way, and all of these other kinds of quality of life questions that many of our residents often have. And so our approach had been, let's first talk to our residents, let's talk to our neighborhood councils to better understand what a vision could be for this platform. Let's build it, let's get some feedback, and let's launch and reiterate. And so as we start to speak with some of our finders, our stakeholders at the very beginning, there were a few takeaways that we'd found, which was that the majority of folks actually saw that demographic information was interesting, yet they didn't necessarily see it as an important issue. And so you'll see how this arises, and many of these findings were just incorporated into our platform to make sure that we address these particular needs. Another one was that a lot of folks were interested in recreation and transportation. And though education wasn't necessarily ranked highly, it was noted that there were quite a few people who were, in general, interested in it. Lastly, it's just important to note that folks were looking for a way to give feedback. And so how do we actually do that? And how do we make sure that we can just make sure that this platform is accountable to some of the interests of our residents? That's where this Know Your Community tool kind of was originally set out to do. And with that, we were able to create this platform. And so I'll do a quick screen share of the platform in and of itself, but then I'll switch over to the slides so we can look at each of the web apps that were created, so that we can give some proper attention to them. For any of you who are interested in kind of the back end pieces of how we actually set this up, from how did we create pipelines of our data sets into our platform, or how did we make sure that all 99 neighborhood councils can be zoomed in on for many of our web apps? these are all kind of welcomed questions that I'd be willing to kind of answer, during our Q&A. So let me go ahead and move us over to the platform. So essentially what you're seeing right now is this Know Your Community platform, as I'd mentioned. When you first kind of get a quick look into it, what you'll see is a community window. You'll see some quick information about our neighborhood councils, the number of board members and liaisons, the total population of the city of LA. You'll get to look into our first web app that showcases a lot of data, which we'll talk about in a second. And you'll see the suite of other web applications that we've created around 311, resilience, demographics, Road to 2400, CleanStat, Streetwise, etc., and many other kinds of opportunities. Similarly, our data literacy opportunities, and just a place in which you can actually start to share your feedback. So let's kind of go back to the presentation and let's look into what these particular web apps are. So the first one that I'd mentioned, and you probably focused on, was this community window. What you actually see here is a platform in which you can type in your address. You can then find out what neighborhood council are you in within the city of LA. What voting centers are readily available in that particular area? Where do neighborhood council meetings occur? And we're specifically speaking to pre-COVID, and whenever we do plan to reopen. Similarly, you'll see open 311 requests in your neighborhood, and you'll also see recently issued permits in the past 6 months, specifically related to commercial and apartment developments. Next, what you'll see, the next one that we typically try to highlight is this demographic explorer. And you kind of saw this at the very beginning too, because what you're able to do is select, either type in your own address or select a neighborhood council and pull a report that is not only interactive, but it can be printable. So folks can better understand things like daytime populations, at-risk populations for households with populations over 65, household affordability, and many other types of questions that many folks typically have around what is it going to look like in the future. Similarly, we are working with our neighborhood councils to think through how can we actually make sure that our neighborhood councils and our residents have as much information as possible for them to better prepare themselves for shocks and stressors in their specific neighborhoods. And so in working with our resilience liaisons in the neighborhood councils, they're actually all planning to build out resilience plans to share with residents and neighborhoods. And so this dashboard is kind of the tool for folks to both advocate for resilience plans at the neighborhood council level, but also to advocate for what some of these priorities should or could be in these neighborhoods. And so it's a dashboard that allows you to both look at some leading metrics as well as if your neighborhood council in and of itself has a plan. The next app is actually this 311 application, in which the community window allows you to see open tickets. This one allows you to see open requests as well as closed requests. How soon were they closed? You can look at what types of requests were they, and all these great kinds of pieces of information to help folks better understand what's happening. What are folks asking for, reporting? Why are they reporting it? Then becomes the question for a lot of folks using this tool. And similarly, in a similar fashion as the 311, we have this Streetwise app. And the Streetwise app is great because it's actually taking advantage of all of the different permitting kind of processes here in the city that have to deal with blocking the right of way. So let's say you're actually planning to make a trip to downtown LA, and yet, this street is at, let's say that I think this is Main Street. If on Main Street there were a lot of different types of road closures or right-of-way blocks, either whether it be sidewalk or street. It's great to be aware of this, especially in this particular time, to plan accordingly. How do I get to where I need to get to, given what's happening, what construction is happening in my specific vicinity? And one of the last few that I'll kind of speak to is this clean stat. This is in collaboration with Sanitation LA, which is really geared towards showing and indicating the cleanliness of our streets. Our Bureau of Sanitation goes ahead and runs quarterly analyses on the cleanliness of our streets. And so this tool can help folks better assess what's happening, how are they being assessed, and both holding the city and ourselves accountable to keeping our streets as clean as possible. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the Know Your Community platform and just explore some of these tools just for folks to get familiar. And so as I'd mentioned at the very beginning, you know, one of the first ones that you'll see is this community window here. And it did take a bit to kind of build this out and just make sure that everything was the way we'd envisioned, since there are quite a few data pieces. I built these pipelines, and it was a task in and of itself. But now that it's all kind of been built out, what you're able to do is type in an address, like let's say 200 North Spring Street. Takes a bit to load because there's so much data, but once it does, you'll be able to see what neighborhood council you sit in, the voting centers, Kenneth Hall, the admin, Bob Hope. Similarly, I could look at the neighborhood council meeting locations. It looks like even Westlake North has their meeting locations in the right on the border of downtown and Westlake North. And then from there, you could also look at building and safety permits, looking at, you know, where the permits have been issued, its valuation, what's the work description, all these kind of little details that you may not have been even considering in the past. And lastly, you can look at all of these open 311 requests, and you can see when they've been opened. Going ahead and kind of pulling to see, you know, what time, what are they asking for, and these kind of great little details. So this community window is really the first place where you can see what is actually happening in my neighborhood and related to city data. And then if you wanted to, you could go ahead and click and find out more about the 311 data, find out more about the resilience information. And if you wanted to, you could look into the Demographic Explorer. This one's a bit more tricky and nuanced in this particular moment in our partnership with Esri, because it does require our folks to join our community, our GeoHub community. And so we actually walk you through creating an account with our GeoHub, and then being able to open the application. And what you'll see is it just makes sure that you know that you have to sign in prior. Once you sign in, you can either go ahead and type in an address, or you could select a neighborhood council. I wanted to look at Boyle Heights. If I wanted to look at Empowerment Congress, I could do that as well. And I could click on whichever infographic I'm interested in. I'll go ahead and just do the coronavirus impact planning just for this moment. And when you do, you click run infographic, and you'll be able to create a nice little report. If you wanted to, you could even dig deeper into the data, find out a little bit more information, print, download, do all of the kinds of great things. And if you wanted to, you could even look into what are these other profiles talking about? What are they doing? So you can find out a little bit more about an employment profile. You can find out a bit more about a commuting profile, and all kinds of great little infographics to better understand what is specifically happening in your neighborhood. This one was a bit challenging to build out, but it's a work in progress. And if you have questions, always feel free to reach out to me. It's one of those things you end up knowing like the back of your hand. And so really just kind of discussing all of the different components of the Know Your Community platform is just a tool for all of us to leverage and better understanding what's happening in our neighborhoods and advocating for the things that we think are most important. At this point, I really encourage you all to go ahead and check it out. See what is interesting about it. See what we should improve on. See what we can do to better support community initiatives that are happening in your specific neighborhood. And for many of you who may not necessarily be familiar with either, the community engagement component and its relationship to data, just understand that your role in developing and producing and analyzing city data is a great contribution for us to better understand how we can better support our residents. We have many different types of skills and capacities here at the city, and we're just looking for ideas, tools, and different approaches that we can use to better support our neighborhoods and our residents. And so really at this point, as I kind of try to get the screen to work with me, it's Q&A. So thank you so much for having me, and let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Preston. Just want to make sure, I think we do have a couple questions in the Q&A. Ed, did you have any that you saw that you wanted to bring up to make sure? I know there was one asking about the URL. I'm just going to send that real quick.
Yeah, I don't see any Q&A on my app, so
okay,
I don't think we have any Q&As.
I think I do have one question here. All right, it comes from a Wesley Rowe. What are your primary personas, types of users, did you design the KYC site for? And do you see the mix of users or mix of visitors that you expected?
Yeah, that's a great question. We just finished creating the platform, and we're still doing a bit of analysis about who's using it and why they're using it. And so at this point, as we think about our primary personas, we were thinking about, and please forgive me if there's a bit of vocabulary disconnect between the two of us, but the way that we kind of formulated it was that we're looking at residents who are looking to get quick information that aren't necessarily tech savvy, who want to just know how's my community changing. And so because of that really is one of our focuses, is just making sure that folks who are actually looking for the ways that communities are engaging with the city, other residents and community folks can better understand what that's looking like for their neighborhoods. And so hopefully we're doing promotion with a lot of community groups and with a lot of stakeholders, and trying to hold as many Zoom meetings as possible as well. But we're really hoping to kind of take a look into our user base very shortly, as we're still collecting this information.
And there looks like there's one more question from Mary Lang asks, can you say more about what exactly resilience plans are with the councils?
Yeah, for sure. So I can definitely talk about it, but I think it may not be as satisfying an answer, or at least in some ways, I hope it is, in the sense that one of the few things to note is that each neighborhood council deals with a variety of issues depending on where they are. Koreatown has a very particular set of concerns, and as a result, they have to prepare accordingly. And so their resilience plan can be more around understanding the daytime populations, thinking about how to make sure that folks can actually exit and leave in a safe manner in condensed particular locations compared to other neighborhoods that may actually be concerned about receding shorelines, or thinking about more of the concerns of being on cliff sides with residents, or concerns may be around tech, particularly because the community itself is more concerned around tech. And so these resilience plans are really geared towards whatever kind of top shocks and stressors the stakeholders are kind of most concerned about, and developing a plan for residents to better understand how to equip themselves and prepare themselves accordingly. And so each resilience plan will look drastically different. Some may be Google Drive or Google folders, some may actually be PDFs. Our goal is to make sure that there are at least PDFs so that folks can be able to point to something. But from there, it really varies depending on where you live and what your community's focuses are. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Okay, looks like we've got one more question from a Harold Huggins. The question is, will the city consider a demographic map on internet outages for the LAUSD students as a resilience plan to reduce computer divide?
That's really exciting. Thank you so much for asking that question. So although today we're speaking to the Know Your Community platform and some of these tools, we've actually been building quite a few different tools and working with LAUSD directly and working with a lot of nonprofit organizations, Human IT being one of them for sure, just around providing digital internet access and just mapping out what where communities with no internet access and household percentages of that actually look like in the city. We were creating dashboards, creating story maps, and if you reach out to me, I'm definitely willing to kind of share some of those as the initiative is moving forward and doing all of these great things. I think the fact that you even share this is a really great idea in the sense of actually adding these tools directly to the Know Your Community platform. So will the city consider that? Absolutely. So thank you so much for sharing that.
All right, let's see if there's any other questions that we have not fielded from the chat yet. I don't see any others coming in. Ed, have you seen any other chats or any other questions coming in from the team?
I've only showed 3 questions, so
okay.
I think we answered them.
Yeah, well, so we had some great questions from the audience. Definitely appreciate their interaction on that. We still have another 7 minutes or so to kind of use for the allotted period. Is there any other topics that you may want to kind of touch on with this time, Preston, or may have anything else maybe to share or mention? I think that we'll definitely try to make sure we have all of these websites available to the attendees as well today. So if you have anything else to share, it'd be probably the best time now to kind of get this in before.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really want to stay focused to this, and I think I've actually spoken to everything. But I will say, if you do have questions around the digital divide or what we're doing to address kind of internet access for our students, that's actually something that we've been really ramping up and prioritizing since the beginning of COVID. And so as we think about the ways that we're negotiating and advocating with telecoms and looking at nonprofit organizations that are either providing labs or learning centers, or the ways that our park and recreation sites are developing these alternative learning centers, or how we're looking to bolster our small cell nodes, or doing this or doing that. There are all these different kinds of policy specific kind of approaches that we are definitely moving forward with. And yet at the same time, the exciting piece is that all of this has to be led with as much information as we have. And so if you have questions around what our data visualizations are looking like that help guide our city, or what are we using in terms of data sets themselves around where public Wi-Fi access hotspots are, or where our libraries are, or Where are these alternative sites? All these, there's so many questions that you can have and that we always have. If you have them, definitely feel free to reach out to me, because it's one of the main conversations that we're trying to have at this point. But the Know Your Community platform fits within that, in the sense that, you know, for folks who do have the capacity to even just take a look at what's happening in their neighborhoods, it's a great tool to better understand what's happening specifically in this particular time. So I just encourage you all to reach out, and if you have any questions, I would love to kind of hear them and speak with you about them.
Awesome, Preston. Actually, looks like we got one last question coming from the audience. Again, Mary, appreciate your engagement. The last question was, are we looking to access the same data at the county level?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that many folks may be familiar with is the Southern California Association of Governments. LA County is definitely a partner in this, and many other cities are also a partner in this. You know, what we at the city have control over and what we can advocate for is what we provide at the city. And yet what we constantly try to kind of speak to with our county and with our other neighboring cities is just how can we make sure that at least what we provide at the city and the models that we're developing here can be accessible and reproducible for other kind of local government. So the short answer is it'd be great to do so. And we're in constant communication with their GIS team and with the teams at the county level. Is it in plans at this particular moment to build the Know Your Community platform for the entire county? I would say that's not currently where we're at, but it would be a great place to kind of see moving forward.
Awesome, Preston. It looks like Mary had mentioned in the chat that what she's doing with her work is actually doing this already as well. So Mary, thank you for your feedback and your input on that as well. So that's amazing. Looks like I don't think we have any other questions coming in at this moment. So I guess with that, Preston, thank you for your time and thanks for your presentation. I appreciate everything you've done and all the attendees for your question interactions during this session. If you want more information, please contact the speaker if you have a further question regarding this topic. Please write your comment and feedback to us for organizers on the community board and start a discussion there to connect with others in DataCon LA 2020 community. Again, thank you for joining today's presentation, and I hope you can gain some insights from this session. Again, have a wonderful day, and thank you for being part of this year's wonderful DataCon LA 2020. Appreciate all your time for joining, everybody. Again, Preston, have a great day.
Take care.